Finding a photograph in the landscape can be one of the most challenging parts of photography. So today I'm sharing some in the field tips that may help the next time that you're out with your camera. So we're back in Snowdonia today to photograph this old abandoned quarry, which is absolutely epic. So I'm really looking forward to that. And because I haven't been here before, I thought it'd be a great way of showing you how I go about finding compositions, fingers crossed. And yeah, typical Snowdonia weather. It's been chucking it down for the last couple of hours, but hopefully things are going to brighten up. So let's get into it. Whenever I'm searching for a composition, I'm looking for two things: a clear subject or an area that catches my eye. Once I've identified one of these, I then start to work on the scene to see if the elements within the landscape can make a compelling image. So things are brightening up a little bit, which is great, which means we've got a bit of light now on these buildings and trees, and this particular area just here has really caught my eye. I think there's probably a few things to work on in this area. So I'm going to get busy, see if we can figure something out. I'm going to flip you around and give you a few of my initial thoughts. So over here we've got some buildings with trees growing out of them, which is pretty interesting. I think that tells a story. I also really like I think it's an oak tree there growing out the bottom of the slate. That's pretty cool. Also, this area here in front of these buildings looks pretty smart as well. I like these trees just here, and also these buildings here. We'll just go around here. You get very expansive views of the quarry, and there's lots of little buildings and trees, a couple of birch trees leaning against these old walls here, which stand out really well against the slate. Got that really big structure in the middle of the quarry there, which is pretty epic. I think this is going to be our first subject. Just here behind me, you can see the lone birch leaning against the side of this old miner's cottage or barrack. So the plan is, I think, to try to isolate some of the silver birch tree within the mountain, so we get the wonderful colours and patterns of the slate quarry behind, and then we've got the leading lines of this wall, this old slate wall, leading the eye down to the birch tree. So this is one of those shots that's not that particularly easy to compose, because if we shoot too low, we're incorporating too much sky. If we shoot too high, we're incorporating too much of the ground, which looks quite drab and dull, not that interesting. So it's a real case of moving subtly to the left, to the right, up and down to get the perfect framing. I want it to be about the tree, but I also want to have a sense of place as well. So we've got the story of these old miners' barracks here. So I'm using leading lines and converging lines to show perspective and scale as well. So one thing I always do when I'm searching for a composition is take the camera off the tripod, because it's so much easier. Once it's on a tripod, you're so restricted. But also, quite often I'll take a wide shot. Now, I've said this many a times, but quite often I'll take a wide shot and then zoom in on the back of my LCD just to see if I can find a composition within that wider frame. Sometimes it's a lot easier to see a shot when it's in 2D, when it's on a screen, than it is when you're seeing absolutely everything with your own eyes. It really allows you to hone in on a specific part of the scene. So that's what I'm going to be doing now. I've seen this lone tree here and a building just behind it, so maybe I can make something work there. So that's what I'm going to work on next. I think I quite like the birch tree shot. So yeah, I'm sure there's another one to be had. So I was planning to shoot this way and capture the building behind, but I couldn't make that composition work. So what I've done is turned around and shooting back the opposite way to which we took the shot with a single birch tree. And this has still got the birch tree in it, but we've got this overhanging tree which is filling the sky, which I think is quite nice. The sky is very boring. There's nothing really in it. It's just grey with a slither of blue in the far distance. So I'm using this overhanging tree to fill the top of the frame, where otherwise it would be quite dull and boring. And I think this can make quite a nice black and white shot, and the eye gets drawn down towards the buildings at the end and then through to the light. So it's just about moving left to right, up and down just a little bit, just to make sure the branches are not hanging down and they're not being cut off by the mountains in the background. So yeah, just piecing it all together, subtle movements from left to right, but I think I'm about right here, maybe about so high. Now, one thing to think about when you're photographing buildings is, obviously we've got a lot of verticals, so it's quite nice to be able to keep those straight. Sometimes if you're shooting with a very wide angle lens, you can get tombstoning effect to your verticals depending on where you're positioned. The further those verticals are towards the edge of the frame, the more accentuated that becomes as well. So that's something to bear in mind. The verticals in these slate walls are all over the place, so it's not too much of a problem. And the other thing I think to think about when shooting buildings is the three-dimensionality of the building itself. So for example, we've got a lot of corners here through the scene, and we're shooting into the shadows. And if you shoot into the shadows when you're shooting buildings, you can really see the shape and form of the image. So here we're shooting into the shadow side of the building, got the light coming through on this one plane, and then we can see the shadows and all the nooks and crannies and the windows and the chimneys. So it definitely helps to tie the image together. So yeah, that's the top tip. I'm always looking for that when I'm shooting buildings, shooting into the shadows. Yeah, really does add a little bit of an extra dimension to the image. If I'm focused about just past the tree, about probably a couple of meters past the tree, that gets everything sharp. 1/10 of a second, f10, ISO 125.
Now, while I like the black and white shot, I knew there was more to come from this scene, so I waited about an hour or so, and to my surprise, a gap in the clouds appeared just at the right time, which completely changed how I composed the scene. The colour and detail in the sky now meant I could include the whole of the tree, and I think this shot highlights that patience can often be rewarded.
Composition is the single most important part of landscape photography, and I'm thrilled to introduce my brand new ebook that delves into this crucial aspect in great detail. In a PDF format, this book is not only a great read, but a fantastic field companion too. So why not take a look by following the link in the video description. Your support is much appreciated. So I had to abandon the video just for a second because it all went crazy, and there was light, and now the clouds are starting to light up, so I'm keeping my fingers crossed that some colours really going to pop and you're going to get an epic sky. So I've framed this composition up here. I was getting drawn down the valley, but actually now I'm shooting across the valley, and I think it works better. I've considered positioning myself low and pushing the building above the horizon, which can make a more dynamic shot. However, by doing that, I lose the lake down in the bottom there, and I like that element of the scene, so I don't really want to compromise losing the lake for pushing that above the horizon. So yeah, I think this it's framed up nicely at 16mm, 1/10 of a second, f11, and yeah, I'm just taking a couple of shots every now and again as the conditions change, and I'm just hoping these clouds light up.
The weather through most of today's shoot was terrible, but for about 10 minutes the conditions were absolutely amazing. The key takeaway here is to use the time when conditions are less than ideal to work on compositions and ideas, and position yourself to capture these photos if the conditions suddenly change. once again highlighting that patience is often the key ingredient.
So shooting old buildings and structures within the landscape is such a great way of telling a story, you know, driving the narrative of the photo, isn't it? And showing emotion and drama and mood within your landscape photos is another great way of building a story. And in the video up here, I talk about that particular topic, so it's well worth checking that video out if you haven't done so already. And please do consider checking out my landscape photography ebook all about composition. I'm sure you'll find that useful. Anyway guys, it's time to wrap up the video. I do hope to see you all again next week.